What do you wish you would have known about business before starting your own? Guys, welcome to day 28 of A Day in the Life of a Creative Entrepreneur, a series that I created as I am making 90 videos, 90 days in a row. And today is day 28, and that's why I wanted to take some time and answer some of the questions that you guys have asked me about work, about life, about business. All these things have been questions that I've received, and today I'm going to be answering the top 5 questions. So let's get into it. So the first question is, how did you become successful and how did you start? I do want to preface this by saying that I don't know exactly what's being asked in the sense of the measurement of success. I don't know if this is asking how I became successful financially, because I do want to say that I'm not making $1 million right now. And so I don't want to speak to that, but if you do mean success in the sense of how was I able to make it my full-time career, and be successful in that, then that's definitely something that I can touch on. But I will start with answering the question, how did I get started? So I think the first thing that's important to know is that it didn't start as something that I wanted to do for like a career, for a job. I just had a cousin who had a camera laying around, and we weren't playing sports or anything during high school or during this time. I think we were younger. We were in like middle school, early middle school. And we would just go skateboard and longboard a lot. We were always out. We were always doing things and all the things that we thought were really cool. And so one time we went up into the canyon to just go skateboarding. My cousin brought his camera with him, and he just asked me to grab a couple of photos of him. So it's funny because I remember before I ever took my first photo, I went to a Peter Lick museum, who is a famous photographer and a very, very successful photographer financially and in his career. But I remember going to one of his museums where it has his photos, and I remember seeing one of the photos was sold for like $3.5 million. And I remember thinking like, that's honestly just outrageous. Like anyone could take a photo like that. That's kind of dumb that he got paid $3.5 million for that. That's honestly my first response. And I thought his photos were cool, but it didn't necessarily inspire me to become a photographer, because it kind of felt like something that anybody could do. But a couple of years later, we were in the canyon. I had this camera, and I remember taking the photo, looking through the viewfinder of this Canon T1i. I think it's a camera that you can get for probably like $80 or $150 now. Like, it's the cheapest of the cheap entry-level camera that you can get. And to me at the time, I thought that it was this really nice, beautiful camera. And it was, because we had really terrible quality cameras on our phones. And so to have a camera that created a good image, and it was a DSLR camera, was really cool. But it was really, really affordable. It wasn't a super nice camera. And I remember clicking that photo, taking that first photo, and when the shutter clicked, something else clicked. Like, it was just, I knew that it was something that I wanted to do. So, and it wasn't, again, at the time and for years and years after this, making money as a creator was not even a thing. Like, you could make money as a photographer. You could make money as like maybe a videographer or director on set, and even those were really hard jobs to get into, and they didn't pay very well unless you were way up. But the idea of being a creator and getting paid to create whatever you wanted to create wasn't a thing. So I had no motivation in getting good at photo and video because of like the financial side of it. And I think because of that, it took off like a lot of pressure, because I didn't know what could have been. I didn't know what the opportunity was. And so I'd focus solely on just creating what I wanted to create. And for years and years, first I should say, I got my first job at Chick-fil-A when I was 16. And I saved up for, I want to say 7 or 8 months. And once I had enough money, I quit my job at Chick-fil-A. I bought a camera. I don't even remember what I did to make money in high school after that. I remember shortly after that, I worked at a trampoline arena, but I remember the whole purpose of me working at Chick-fil-A was to save enough money to buy my first camera, because I was using my cousin's camera for a little bit. And then he texted me and was just like, dude, I need to have the camera back. If you really want to keep doing this, you have to be able to get something yourself. And that really pushed me in the right direction. And I owe him honestly everything, because I don't know if he didn't give me the camera in the first place to borrow. And if he didn't push me to buy my own camera and take it seriously, I don't know if I would be here right now. And he was a huge inspiration to me and a large reason as to why I'm doing this today. So huge shout out to my cousin Mitchell. Thank you so much, brother. I owe you big time, and my life is beautiful because of it. So that was the way that I started. But then I remember seeing creators like Sam Kolder or Matt Como or some of these early YouTubers who would just make really cool travel videos. And I wanted to be able to do something like that. And even if it wasn't in travel, I just wanted to be able to make videos that were that cool and make people feel the same way that I felt when I watched those videos. And so every single video I made, I tried to make it as good as their video. And I think that's what really, really pushed me, because it wasn't like, oh, I want to try to make this video a little bit better than my last video. It was like, no, I'm going to spend 70 or 100 or 120 hours on this one minute video, because I'm going to do everything that it takes to make sure that this video looks as good as Sam Colder or Matt Como or any of those guys. And at the end of the projects, they were never close to as good. But I remember I did every single thing I could possibly do to make it the best video possible, and to try to get on their level and to be as good as they are and to inspire people as much as they were inspiring me. And, you know, in hindsight, I definitely was never close to that good, but I wish that I would have kept that same work ethic, because if I did, I probably would be on their level today. But then down the road, after making a lot of these videos, right before I left on a 2-year mission for my church without having a camera, a career, any of that, got my first job opportunity. And it was a clothing company, and they're like, hey, we'll pay you like $320 to come shoot this video. And I think it took me like 2 hours. I mean, at Chick-fil-A and at the trampoline arena, I was getting paid like minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. And then taxes were taken out. So to go from making like $6 an hour, or, you know, whatever tax, like $5.50 an hour after taxes, to making like $160 an hour for a couple of hours that were non-taxed, it was unbelievable. And it just sparked something in me. And I knew from a young age that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I thought it was going to be something boring, you know, just starting a business and something I didn't really want to do, but I just wanted to have the freedom and make the money. But then by the time I got done with my 2-year mission for my church, I had a couple of people reaching out to me and asking me if I could do projects for them. And so we lined up some days when I got home from my mission that I could start that. And I happened to have enough projects lined up when I got home that I just asked for an advance on those payments before I made the projects. And I bought all my camera gear with that. And the remaining money that I didn't have, I went and sold solar for like 3 or 5 days and then paid off the rest of my camera gear. So that gave me the ability to start my business without any debt. And then that meant that all I had to do was focus on paying for whatever my monthly expenses were. And at the time, for the first year and a half, I was back from my mission when I was 20 years old. I was living with my mom, so my overhead was not very high at all. And it gave me a lot of opportunity to take a lot of shots in the dark and to try things and to do a lot of free projects. And, you know, I really made it work. And it was a really cool opportunity and a really exciting time. Because I believed that the future was so big, and that I was just in such a good spot and I had such an unfair advantage. And I do want to say, like, even now, I'm paying for rent. I have my car, I have insurance. I'm paying for the adult things, you know, that don't give you as much of an unfair advantage. But even now, like, there are always ways that you can make it work. I think it just comes down to being like a risk taker and betting on yourself enough to know that if you put yourself in a position where you have to figure it out, then you have to figure it out. And if you believe that you can do that, then you really can start anything and you can be successful at anything. But having enough of a trust and a belief in yourself is probably the hardest part, because for me, I disliked school. I disliked working for somebody so much from when I started from a young age, that I knew that I would rather do anything than that. So it was a pretty easy decision for me to not have a job and to try to make it work as a creator. And because of that, you know, I just went all in and I just gave it my best for as long as I could. And then, you know, people started seeing my work, people started talking, word of mouth spread. And before I knew it, I started having a couple of clients, started shooting a couple of weddings. Weddings evolved to, you know, shooting some other projects, like some stuff for random companies, shooting real estate exteriors, you know, just all sorts of things that you probably would never think about. And then before I knew it, I started shooting the things that I actually wanted to shoot, which was like supercars and working with cool sales companies that did really cool work. And then I started to like build these relationships, build trust. And that's really like how I went from where I was to like where I am now, which is, you know, that's how I started. I bought my first camera and I just grinded because I wanted it bad enough. And it just happened. And it didn't happen quick. Like, I think from the time that I bought my first camera to the time that I got my first gig was like, I want to say like 2 years, like maybe like 2, almost 3 years. And then I didn't make any money from the next 2 years after that. So really, like in my first 5 years of being a photographer and videographer, I only made $320. But then like on my 6th year, I made $12,000. On my 7th year, I made $30,000. On my 8th, I made like $72,000. And then last year I made like just over $100,000. So yeah, I mean, it grows as you grow, but at the same time, there are like a lot of lessons that you can learn in between. And one of those that I've learned this last year is that if you don't keep giving it your all, and if you think that it's time for you to be able to like rest and relax because you're good enough, you're doing the work and you're making people happy with the content you're making, it's really easy to become complacent and think that everything's just going to keep rolling the same way. But that's unfortunately that just hasn't been the case. And I definitely have like burned some relationships with some of my clients because I wasn't giving that maximum do or die 100% effort on all of my projects. So that's something that I've learned. And I've also learned that if I don't have the energy, mental, emotional, physical, or the time, if I can't give 100% and if I can't do my best work, then I just won't work with the client at all. Because I want to make sure that the work that I'm doing is excellent work. And, like I said, I learned that if you're not doing excellent work all the time, then it's going to hurt your relationship with the people that you're working with. So, ebbs and flows. As of this year, I'm not lined up to make 100,000 again, but you never know. Like I think February I made like $2,000 or $3,000, and then March I made like 10 or 11,000. But then, right after that went back down to like maybe 4,000. So it ebbs and flows a lot. And if I wanted, I could put a lot more structure and stability in the business. But yeah, I say all of that and I kind of go on that tangent just to say that I'm not necessarily like as successful financially as a lot of people think, because I think when a lot of people hear that I made $100,000, they think that I made $9,000 or $10,000 every single month of the year. But the reality is that I had some months last year where I made around 15 grand, 16 grand. And then I had other months where I was making like 3,000 or 4,000, which is less than, some full-time jobs like McDonald's or something. So yeah, I mean, it's just something that you deal with, and you just have to know how to like be able to keep your overhead low. So on the months where you don't make a lot, then you're still able to pay the bills. And on the months that you do make a lot, you can invest more in your business. You can celebrate by taking like a little trip or going on a nice date with your person, or, there are a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And all I know is if you want it, then you will figure it out as you go. That is the reality of being an entrepreneur. I don't know if that fully answers the how did you become successful part, but I do want to say if you want to stay successful, then stay hungry, and keep wanting to improve. And if you need to take some sort of break, if you need some more energy because you feel like you've burned out or depleted yourself, the best advice I could give is just to communicate that with the people who you're working with so you don't ruin those relationships. And that's how you can stay successful. So the next question I got is, how do you balance content creation with having a wife? I think this is a really good question. And the fact that you're even asking the question shows that you really value both art and your relationships, and you want to keep both of those things healthy. And I think that that's the first step, is just being mindful. And second, making sure that you communicate that with both yourself, your relationship with art. Like, what do you want your relationship with content creation to be like? Do you want it to be like for fun? Do you want it to be like your full-time job? I think first knowing what your relationship is with content creation will help you figure out how you want to and how you can balance it. And then again, knowing, the relationship that you want to have with your wife will also make a huge impact, because, right from the start, my wife and I have always talked about these sort of conversations. And there have been a lot of times that I have talked to her about, before we got married, I would express my fears and like tell her like, hey, like, this is not going to be a super easy life. Like, it's probably going to ebb and flow a lot. Like, I've heard the life of an entrepreneur is not easy, and I just want you to know what you're getting yourself into. And, I think there was just a lot of communication there and a lot of expectations being set up front. So when it came down to it, both of us knew what we were getting ourselves into, and we were ready to support each other before that happened. And honestly, I think if we didn't communicate at the beginning, and if we didn't try to continue communicating the best we can along the way, I think it would be a lot harder. But because my wife knows how important content creation and business is to me in my life. She supports me because she loves me. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a really solid balance in it. In fact, like this last month, as I've been making these YouTube videos every day, it has been anything but balance. We love being able to go to bed together every night, read a quick story, maybe some scriptures, and say prayer together. We like being able to like have that part of our relationship. And for this last month, I've been going to bed hours and hours after her, and she even tries to stay up and wait for me so that we can go to bed. But usually by the time it gets to 1 or 2 a.m., if I'm still working, she'll go to bed because she needs sleep. And so it's hard. Like, it's not always going to be balanced, especially like in the grind seasons when you're learning and you're trying to like figure things out. You're trying to make it. It's not always going to be balanced. And I think understanding that there's not always going to be balance in every season is really important, and is really important in like on your mental health. Because if you are like trying to grind, if you are trying to create something and you feel like you're a failure if you're not balanced, then you're already setting yourself up for misery. Because I think suffering comes from desire and thinking that something should be a way that it's not. And so, yeah, I mean, if there's like that gap there, like if you believe that you should be making $100,000 a year and you're only making 30, you're going to be miserable. But if, you're used to making $0 and you're just excited to, create in general, and then on top of that, you make an additional 30K a year, then you're going to be really, really stoked. So I think just knowing your relationship with your wife, with content creation, like what you really want to get out of it, I think that's all really, really important. And just making sure that you give intentional time to each of those things. For example, if you are doing like content creation for like a job, or if you're not doing it for a job and you just want to put a lot of time into it, just, telling your wife like, hey, this is really, really important to me. This is something that really matters to me. I want to put 8 or 10 hours a day into this, even after my full-time job. So that will only leave us with like 30 minutes to an hour and a half to hang out every day. But I want you to know that I really, really value that time. And I want to make sure that time, that little time that we have together every day is special, and that we are both off our phones and we're both, together. And honestly, it's sad to say, but if you can have 30 minutes to an hour and a half of intentional time with your person, it doesn't sound like a lot, especially compared to what maybe a lot of people get. But if it's intentional time, you're probably getting more than what most people get. Because at the end of the day, if you have a lot of time together, then you think that you can be on your phones, be distracted, do other things. But then before you know it, 5 hours has gone by. You guys have been watching shows, you've been on your phones, you've kind of been doing your own thing, and you didn't get any intentional time together. So that's something that my wife and I have found to be really helpful, is just making sure that the time that we do have, that we really pay homage to that time and we're in it together, and we are just really intentional about the time that we're spending together. And if you can do that, if you can just, I'll say it again and again, if you can make sure that you just know what you're getting yourself into and try your best to honor those relationships and, what you set out to do in those things, and stay in good communication, then that's the best way to have a healthy relationship with content creation and with your wife. So again, I don't know if I would say it's balanced, but I think at the end of the day, having a healthy relationship is a lot more important than having a balanced relationship, because you can have a balanced relationship and it not be healthy. So I hope that answers your question. I know for sure you can figure it out if you can just show how important that is to you, but also be willing to listen to their side. And yeah, it'll be all good. So the next question that I got is, how do you not go crazy editing all day? Do you outsource any of your editing? So to answer that question, I don't really outsource any of my editing. I actually just barely outsourced my first project that's still in the works right now. So, I think out of the hundreds of projects that I've done, I've maybe outsourced the editing on like 5 of them. So to answer the question, I don't really outsource my editing, because I believe that's where, the project can really come to life. But I totally can hear what you're saying when you say, how do you not go crazy editing all day? Because that definitely is being inside all day, editing all day, focusing on the creative. It is so exhausting, and it can definitely make you go stir crazy. It can make you feel like you can't focus and you need to be doing anything other than that. But from my experience, I ran into the same thing when I had been doing creative full time for, I think 1 or 2 years. I hit this point where I just did not want to edit anymore at all. It took me honestly, I think I had a client, it took me 2 months to turn around a project because every time I would try to sit down and do it, I just felt like it wasn't coming out to be the way that I wanted it to be. So first I want to say, if you feel like you are going crazy editing all day, it's probably not just because of how much time you're spending. It might be because of how much pressure you're putting on yourself in that editing environment. You're probably trying to create a masterpiece. You're going into it trying to make the project perfect. And that will definitely be the quickest thing to burn you out. Now, if you're not doing content full time, it's still not healthy, but you can afford to try to make each project as perfect as you can. But if you have to rely on creating content regularly, even monthly, you just can't. You have to be able to sit down and look at the project objectively. Of course, you want to be able to put in your heart and you want to make it special. But if you're just trying to make every project perfect, you won't even be able to last a second. And so when I see that question, how do you not go crazy editing all day? I don't see it as much of a question of how do you actually sit there and do the work. I think it's more of a mental struggle that you might be dealing with, which is that you're just putting too much importance on your editing. And I know it's hard to drop that because you think if you're going to be creating something, why not give it your very, very best? And I still feel that way all the time. But at the same time, if that was the same mindset that I was going into, I wouldn't be able to do this 90-day challenge that I'm doing right now. And none of these videos have been as good as I've wanted them to be, but I've been able to learn a lot that I wouldn't have been able to learn had I been putting everything into each of these videos. So to answer your question, just try to edit for a whole day and have no expectations. Don't try to make it perfect. Just try to make the edit and wake up again, do it the next day. And if you can do that and you can stick with that, it might be 3, 6, or even 9 months. It can be a long time, but you will 100% make it out of that phase and you'll be a much, much better editor and your tolerance will be a lot bigger, which means you can take on a lot more projects and you can handle a lot more. And that's where a lot of the real growth and the real success starts to come in. So, dude, to answer your question, I'm not saying I didn't go crazy editing all day for a lot of these years or a lot of the days that I was putting in, but just try to do little things to break up the day and be able to take some breaths throughout your day, whether it's going to the gym, getting some good meals with some friends, being able to just watch a YouTube video you want to watch, laying on the couch doing nothing, breath work, yoga, any type of running exercise. Any of these things might be good ways for you to break up your day, but I would just try to commit to pushing through and knowing that if you do, then you're going to be way ahead of a lot of people, because where you're at right now, where people feel like they're going crazy because they're editing so much, that's where most people are going to stop. And if you can push through that, then you have a huge advantage over a lot of people. When working with clients, what's your start to finish workflow when booking, shooting, editing, and reviewing? I think honestly, for me, I've been told a couple of times in business that sometimes I can, be too emotional about things, because generally I'm just a lot more emotional leaning. And that means that I let my actions lead with emotions more often than logic. And I let that really take over in business sometimes. And most of the time, I think that can be a good thing when you're a small business and you're working with small businesses, because it feels human and you're able to create trust and build those connections a lot quicker. But I've also seen it not be so helpful. So to touch on that, the reason I say that is because I want to say that not every interaction is the same, because I want to give them all each their individual touch and be able to, treat that relationship and be able to give the energy that's needed for each of those relationships and in each of those situations. But to do the best that I can to answer that question, the start to finish workflow is normally you say when booking. I don't know if you mean outreach or literally just getting them on the schedule, but I'll start with outreach just in case that's what you mean. Say that there's somebody that I want to work with or they want to work with me. I'll always just say, hey, like, let's get you on the calendar. I want to do a free shoot for you. And if you like the work that I'm doing, then let's talk about pricing. Let's talk about doing something more on a regular basis. People are eager to book like a free shoot. You know, it's not like a huge sacrifice on their part, and they'll get something really good out of it. So they want to hop on that deal while they can. So that gets you in the door with them, gets you something on the calendar, and then they know the process of working with you, and they know whether or not they like you. And if you're likable, if you go in and you try to make it a good experience for them, then I've found that 9 out of 10 clients that you try to do this with are ready to go forward with you. And most of the time, they don't even want to do work on like a retainer. But if you come in and provide that type of value, they'll try to find some way to give you more work. And most of the time that lands on a retainer, which is how you get consistent income as a creator. So that's kind of the outreach and booking process. Also, as far as booking, I don't know if you're asking like how much I charge or how I charge. And I don't charge per hour. I don't charge by editing. I always charge per project. So I don't know if that's what you mean by booking, but it's not like, hey, I'm available from 2 to 4. It's like, hey, what type of content do you want to get done? Why are you hiring me? And this is how much it's going to cost. So that's kind of like the booking process, I guess. And then when it comes to shooting, before the shoot, I just figure out what it is that they want. Why are they hiring me? Why did they reach out to me? Why are they willing to put money into working with me? And I just make sure that I figure out at least what they want, and then try to go the extra mile to over deliver so that I can create a good relationship with them and, you know, have more opportunities to get better at what I love and keep being a creator, because that's what I wanted to do. You know, as for the workflow of shooting, I always make sure that I have all my gear ready before every shoot, make sure that it's charged. SD cards are cleared most times. Sometimes, I forget, but most of the time, I just have everything lined up. And even if I don't think that I'm going to use like all of the stuff that I bring, I always bring everything just in case I feel like I have time to try to be able to, get some like cool creative shots that I haven't tried. And, that's kind of how they go. So I bring all my stuff to the shoot and I film all the things that I know that they want me to film. And then with all the leftover energy and time I have, I'll do a lot of my own stuff to, try to add my own creative flair. And then when it comes to editing, honestly, I've heard a lot of people talk about pre-production and how important that is in the process. I've never been somebody who is good at pre-production or just naturally even wants to do pre-production, because I feel like a lot of times my best ideas come, on the whim. And I tend to be a little bit more of like a spontaneous person in general. I like doing things last minute and really cool things. So it just makes sense for somebody like me to try to be spontaneous in my shooting style. But sometimes the projects that you're working on require some pre-production. I just like to have like the creative freedom and flow and just see how things feel when I'm on set. And that's kind of like what the shooting process is like. And the same carries over in like the editing space, where when I'm editing, I think the best way to make a really, really good video is to not have a strict idea of how it needs to look, but going through the video and trying to just get a feel for how it's best pieced together. And I think that's something that tends to separate my work from others. Even if my work isn't always viewed as better, it has a special creative flair, so to speak, that some people specifically look for. And I think that's kind of my edge. That's kind of my purple cow. And that's why like a lot of people will hire me and refer me, because I'm not just another videographer who will come and click record. And you don't need to be either. This is something that you can do. It's not special to me. It's just a process that I do and most people don't. So again, it's not like my thing. You can totally take it. You can do the same thing where you go shoot and then, go edit and just try to figure things out in post. I think a lot of these, edgy creators who are doing cool things, pushing the boundaries, I think this is how they do it, is making sure that they leave room for a lot of this creativity. So that's what the post workflow editing is like. And then I don't know if you want it to be a little bit more technical, but if you do, I drop all of my content into DaVinci Resolve, and then I sift all of the content. And then after sifting it, I find music that I want to use for the video. And I start to get a feel for how I want the video pacing to be and how I want things to feel. And then I'll start building my video with the footage that I have around that. And I already know what footage I have to work with and what good shots I have, because I just barely sifted through it. That's tended to be really good for me. When I started, I feel like my videos were like had a little bit more heart in them. And what I would do before is I would just like have a song, and then I would listen to the song, and I would go look through every single clip and see which I felt like would be best for that part of the song. And I really feel like that was a really special way to create, but it took me like 70 to 100 hours per project. And oftentimes the videos were only like 30 seconds to a minute and a half. So to be putting, over 2 weeks into a video that's only 30 seconds is just not sustainable, especially, if you have other responsibilities or if you need to make money. So it's kind of two different ways of looking at it. That's how I've done it. As far as reviewing, I don't know if you're asking in the perspective of the client reviewing it or if you're looking over at it and reviewing it yourself. I always just make sure that things feel good and flow right. And if there's anything that my mind immediately thinks like, oh, this will be better if you do this, and I really feel like it'll move the needle, then I always make those changes and I always try to make it as good as possible that way. And then, so I know that was a lot of information. Some of it was technical, some of it was vague, but I hope that answers the question that you were asking. And I hope you get a lot of value from that and the other things that I've been talking about so far. So the last question I'm going to answer, question number 5, which is, what do you wish you would have known about business before starting your own? So to answer that question, it's probably not the answer that you're looking for, because what you're asking is what I wish I would have known. But what I'm going to tell you is that I'm glad that I didn't know anything. I never had anybody around me who was like an entrepreneur growing up who, told me about the ways of business or how things should go or did sales or anything like that. It was always very traditional in my life and in my home. And in a lot of ways, I'm really glad that I didn't know anything about business and anything about entrepreneurship, because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I think if I knew how hard it was going to be, then I probably would have thought twice before getting into it. But at the end of the day, this is what I really want to do. This is what I wanted to do, is being an entrepreneur. And that's deep within me. I can just feel that that's what I want to be doing with my life. And so either way, I was going to have a business, but I know for myself, I'm quite an overthinker, and it probably would have taken me a lot longer to start a business because I probably would have been trying to perfectly figure out all the details before starting, and not knowing anything prevented me from overthinking and just got me to go, because I didn't know that there was any type of structure in business. I didn't know that you should have offers, and I didn't know that there was ways to work with clients and not work with clients, and certain ways to, make money and pitch offers. And, there are a million things that I didn't know about business. And I think if I knew any of those, it probably would have scared me a little bit and taken me a little bit more time to get there. So again, to answer that question of what do you wish you would have known about business before starting, I would just say know as little as you can before starting, and just start, and then try to figure out as much as you can after you start. Since starting my business, I have spent hundreds of hours reading entrepreneurship books, listening to podcasts from entrepreneurs, listening to How I Built This with Guy Raz and how other people built their businesses, taking courses, watching YouTube, watching Alex Hormozy. If not hundreds of hours, I'm probably in the thousands of hours of trying to learn how to become a better entrepreneur and a better business owner. And I think it's important to soak in all of that knowledge and be a student as much as you possibly can be. But I think if anything, the most important thing you can do is start and then become the student, rather than try to be a student and then try to apply all those things, because they're going to be a lot more applicable and they're going to stick in your mind a lot more when you're dealing with those problems in the moment, and when you can apply those new learnings immediately. So, but I don't want to leave you totally empty-handed. So I will answer that question again one more time of what do you wish you would have known about business before starting your own? If I had to choose one thing, I think something that I wish I would have known is that you don't have to be anything special. You don't have to do anything special. You just have to do the thing that you say you're going to do. For me, when I was younger, I always thought that every entrepreneur was extremely special and they had something that nobody else had, and they were lucky and they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and or some sort of hustle culture, or they had some experience that made them need the success, but it really is none of that. Sometimes it's as simple as somebody wants to make money and they don't want to work from somebody else, and that's all that it takes. So I wish I would have known that you don't have to be a super special person or thing, or you don't have to do anything next level. All you have to do is provide value for somebody. And if you can provide value, then people will pay you. And I think by now, most people know that, but that's definitely something that I didn't know. And if I knew that, then I think I would have focused sooner on how can I provide value rather than how can I make this look cool, from a videography perspective. So to answer that question, provide value. That's the one thing I wish I would have known. And that's what people are paying for. and that people are paying for, and that people will pay you according to the problem that they have. So the bigger problem, the bigger they're going to pay you. So I know that was kind of a lot, but I hope that you guys got some answers to questions that you had, and I hope you felt like you were able to learn a little bit more about me. I really appreciate you guys asking these questions, being interested, and trusting me with the answers to those, because I know that those are heavy questions and those carry a lot of weight, and those aren't just something that you want to take and throw by the wayside. These are like really things that if you're asking these questions, you're ready to like apply them and really like learn from them. So the fact that you would be willing to trust me with those questions means the world. And I really, really just appreciate that so many of you guys were willing to ask questions like this, and to go out of your way to, give me something that I can make a YouTube video about and to connect with me in that way. So thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. We have another 62 days worth of making videos before I kind of slow down on it. This whole sprint is really just about me figuring out what I want to make on YouTube, how I want to make it, and just improving on everything in between. If you're here for the journey, please subscribe. If not, hopefully down the road when I figure out exactly what I want to stick to, that will be something that you might want to stick around for as well. So either way, thank you guys for being here. Thanks for asking the questions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.